Today we're in Chester, Montana, and we're joined with Philip Aaberg, who is an internationally renowned composer and pianist. Philip, nice to have you on the program today.
Thanks for coming to Chester. Good to be here.
We're going to talk about a whole host of things, but first it's always fun to go back and find out a little about childhood and where you're from, that kind of thing. Where were you born?
I was born in Aaberg, but that's just because there wasn't a hospital in Chester at the time. And I grew up right across the street.
So this is home, truly.
This is home, yeah.
What about your family? How many brothers and sisters?
I have one brother who lives in Billings.
Okay.
The rest of my family is gone, but I have cousins and uncles and aunts all over the place.
At what point do you think in your young life did you take the road down to music? Was there anything that you remember that happened, whether it would be in school or what?
Oh, absolutely. Right here. This building, which is the Art Center in Chester, and has served various community functions over the years, was the St. Mary's Catholic Church, the original church. And right up there in the choir loft was where my grandmother was choir director, and then my mother was choir director. And actually before them, my great uncle was choir director too. So it was right here basically where I got most of my music. And in those days it was Gregorian chant that was in the Catholic Church. And I remember absolutely plain as day coming home from school, or from church on Sunday, having heard a piece that I heard, hundreds of times. I was 4 years old, and I came home and nobody was home, and I sat down at the piano and I figured out this piece. And I can remember it just like it was yesterday. And there was something about that, being able to figure something out, being able to make that music that just felt so great to me, and it wasn't an audience response, it wasn't somebody saying, well, that was really great, Phil, that was wonderful, I was all by myself, and I figured it out, and it felt so good that it felt like something I'd do the rest of my life.
Your brother, did he go the same direction, or did he go a different direction?
Steve is an archaeologist now, and he's a really great blues guitar player, and he and I actually played in a band when we were all through high school, right here, in the same building, too, that was the church, and is now the Art Center. It was kind of a community hall, and we held dances here. And Steve used to sit up right over here with his guitar, and I had a Vox Continental organ right over there.
Amazing. The music itself, you think of a youngster learning piano at a young age, and do I have to practice? How did that all fit in? You said 4 years old. Take us through the rest of your life.
Well, the rest of my life,
okay, how about
that's a long time
frame.
How about
your childhood?
Well, I started taking lessons at 6 because that was, they figured if once you can learn, how to read, then you can start taking piano lessons. So I studied with Peggy Wiley, who just retired as a teacher in Great Falls, I think last year or the year before. So I just dug right into it. I asked for piano lessons. I really wanted to learn. And that was, I kept going on that and got a lot of support from the community until you hit about the age when you start playing sports, 7th, 8th grade, seriously. And I really loved basketball and baseball and football. I remember many times when my mother or my grandmother had to yell out the door for me to come back from playing, games. And I think there's all kids need a certain push at that point. But and I was the same. I played basketball into high school, and we had a second and state team, when I was playing. And so I pretty much had a normal town life, I think, a small town life, which is basically that you do everything.
Do you find that people who are very successful in this business, like you have been, that kind of the same thing happened to them at a young age? They knew that's what they wanted to do with their life? I
think it really varies. You hear people who, it didn't hit them until they were 20 or didn't hit them until they were 14, and you hear people like me who knew from a very early age. So I think it varies. Everybody has their own time about their life. There is no set time. By this age you should be doing this, by this age you should be doing that.
So when you were in junior high or high school or maybe even college, there wasn't any one person that really directed you. You were already there then.
Oh no, there were always people along the whole line. There are people who always give you what it is that you need to continue, and you need a lot of support no matter what kind of talent you have. You always need a mentor. You always need somebody to encourage you. Sometimes you need somebody to kick you. My mother was always great at that, at getting me going and keeping me on a path. The people in town were always great at that. I had a good basketball coach who really was very important in my life and encouraged me in a lot of different ways, to be all that I could be. But in high school, I started going to Spokane, Washington, on the train to study with Margaret Saunders Ott, who just this year, in fact in March, she'll receive the Teacher of the Year award from the Music Teachers National Association, and Margie May is 83, so this is the first time she's getting that award. She's still teaching.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So she, at that point, she was the one who really showed me what it was like to be a professional musician. You know, I think if you excel at anything in a small town, you don't really know how you compare. You know, you can be a great basketball player in Chester, but till you get to University of Oklahoma, you're really not going to know how you are. But she gave me that sort of sense of what it was to be professional in high school. I went there during my high school years and was exposed to a lot of different kinds of music, and she had great students there who have gone on to have you know, big classical music careers. So I could compare myself to them, and I realized, you know, how much work I had to do. And she was a really big influence and still is.
And the work you must have done, because from high school you went on to college?
Right, I went to Harvard.
Harvard and studied music?
I went to Harvard and studied music, which was a really weird thing to do in those days. It wasn't a weird thing to go to Harvard, although it was pretty weird for me, you know, considering that this is the town I came from, where that wasn't really a tradition. But studying music in those days, it was more of a theoretical thing at Harvard. There was less performance, there was more harmony, theory, and history. And those are things that are important when you're studying music. But, you know, I was one of those people, I was chomping at the bit. Performance was such a big part of my life that it was really a shock to get to Harvard and realize that nobody was going to show me the way. Nobody was going to say, well, here, next week you're playing this, you know, 2 weeks from now you got that to do. And pretty much I had to be self-directed, and that was actually a very, very good thing to go through, even though at the time I didn't. It was painful. It was definitely painful.
The goal that you had set for yourself in college, the type of musician that you wanted to be, is that where you are today, or did you go a different direction? You
know, I'll have to say that also growing up in a small town, it made me the type of musician that I am today, which is I do everything. I mean, I'm insatiable music junkie. I like every kind of music, and I want to play as much of that music as I can. And that's not a traditional career. I know a lot of musicians who are like me who do that, but that's not really the traditional thing that you learn in school. So once I got to Harvard, I really kind of was looking for someone to show me the way, and I think I was such a amphibious character, you know. I mean, I played rock and roll, and I played classical, and I played jazz, and I played new music, and I played everything. I played bluegrass. I think, you know, people didn't really quite know what to do with me. You know, if I had been one of a classical pianist who studied the classical repertoire 8 hours a day and done that, I think it would have been a lot easier for someone to say, okay, here, do that. And, you know, a few people did try and, direct me into a certain area. But I think subconsciously realized that wasn't for me.
A lot has happened in your life. After college or during college, what do you think was your one big lucky break that really got you exposed nationally?
See, but your lucky breaks happen. You know, it's a career isn't a destination. It's a process, really, I think. And so you just have a series of these things that happen. You know, I kept thinking that one thing was going to be my lucky break, and then if you keep on going, you have to keep working. You have to keep doing things. But basically, I left college, and I was at Marlborough Music Festival, which was great training. There was great chamber music people there, but that didn't really lead to anything. And then I studied Beethoven piano sonatas in Iowa with Kenneth Drake, and then I came out to the San Francisco Bay Area, lived in Oakland, and I started playing in clubs around there, blues clubs. And I played with a guy named Elvin Bishop, who used to come in off the road and would come to these clubs and just jam with different bands. So played with Elvin, and you know, after a couple of months, he called me up and said, well, Phil, you want to come down and do a record down in Macon? You know, he talked like that, but very smart fella. And I said, sure. So I kind of started out on that path for a while, a rock and roll path. Made a lot of records, and we had records that were played on the radio, which of course that was one of my great aspirations. One of my dreams was to hear myself playing on the radio.
I noticed that Peter Gabriel was mentioned on your website.
Right.
These things just kind of, one person hears you and word of mouth, and the next thing you know, you're offered a gig with somebody else for a while?
Yeah, it's the meritocracy, you know. It's what you can do in music is much more important than who you know. So people would see that I could play, and then they'd recommend me to their friends, and that's sort of how that part of my career proceeded.
What are some of the things you've done in your career that maybe have amazed you, that some places that you've been able to play or perform that you go, wow, I really made it. I really did a good job. Or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, see, I've just had a tendency through my whole life to throw myself into water that's way too deep for me. So
that's okay if you know how to swim.
well, sometimes I didn't. And I just wanted to see whether I could, you know. I mean, if somebody would say, well, can you do this? And I'd say, yeah, I'm not having a clue as to whether I could. For example, someone said, well, score this movie. I said, yeah, I can do that. Man, it was hard work, I'm telling you, because I had to learn from the ground up, you know, how to do it. So I think that's one thing that I would tell young people is to just, you know, if you love something, just throw yourself into it. Throw yourself into anything that you can find. And just keep going with that. You know, whether you think you're in over your head, I mean, all you can do is fail, really. So,
if you get lost, ask for help.
That's right. Yeah, a lot of people are willing to help you.
I'd like to talk about what maybe other musicians and people in the business think of Philip Aaberg. Obviously, is a professional, but here he is sitting in north central Montana in Chester, doing what he wants to do. Do they think that's odd in any way? Or
They're
not?
jealous.
Are they?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, they wish they could move out of the, you know, out of a city where you have nothing but traffic and congestion and lines and expensive places to live. And I just think that it's, you know, at some point you can do that. You can just move. For us, it was a good thing to do. It was a good thing to come here. It was the right time to do it. We have a young child who's 2 years old. This is a great place for him to live. For me, I've discovered that it doesn't matter. I mean, most of what I'm doing now is composing and practicing. And then I'll kind of head out and I'll play with some bands, or I'll head out and I'll do a concert tour of my own. But most of what I do could be done in a garage with a blue screen up behind me, you know. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where I am, because I'm so directed on what I'm doing that I'm not really aware of the surroundings. I mean, you can talk to my wife about that. Once I get in a zone composing, she just kind of shoves food under the door, you know, and leaves me alone. And that's basically, you can do that anyway.
Any involvement there? Your wife, is she involved in music in any way?
Well, Patty was a violinist and played in the Stanford University Symphony, and is very musical and runs our business. She runs Sweetgrass Music. She runs my record company and all the subsidiary stuff that we do. She's it. She was the alternate marketing director for Windham Hill Records years and years ago. So she knows what she's doing. So
the marketing aspect of your music can be done from Chester. I noticed on your website that your music's available on your website. Well, absolutely. I mean, Live from Montana, which was recorded over here in the auditorium in Chester, was a benefit for the school district. Was our second release on Sweetgrass Music, and it was nominated for a Grammy last year. So why not? Let's talk about that. It was just almost a year ago that you were sitting in an auditorium at the Grammys. What did that feel like to you? Well, you were talking about, did you ever hit a point where you said, this is it? I think that was one, in the last, 7 or 8 years, that was one of the high points. The other one was getting the Montana Governor's Award for the Arts. And they both, it's really interesting because they both have served not to, it was, once again, I was talking about a career not being a destination, but, a process. And both of those things, both of those honors have served to just kick me, to make me want to work harder and do more and get around more, rather than say, well, I finally arrived, But it was such a great celebration. And what you see on the Grammys, to me, when you see the night show, that's nothing. The real thing is the day before, the night before, when all these different categories together, all these musicians from all over the world, all over the country, are together from all these different kinds of music, really celebrating music. You're celebrating this life in music. You're not looking at the numbers of records that you sell. You're not looking at who goes on first and who gets the most time. You're not looking at who has the most fireworks going on. It's just a real, honest celebration of music, and that's what people don't see about the Grammys. And that was a big surprise to me. And it was just
it really filled my heart. It was a really wonderful thing.
You were up against some stiff competition last year, too.
Oh yeah, I only had to sell about 30 million more records in order to keep up with Enya. You know, that was.
Well, of course, yeah. And you were, and I think we talked before even the Grammys, and I think you were concerned at that time because Enya was so popular.
Yeah, you know, I've never expected I'm going to sell a lot of records, and so it was kind of a wonderful thing that I even got nominated. You know, that enough people knew who I was, that they knew the record, and said, "Well, let's give this guy this."
You know what I didn't realize is that just getting the nomination, you get to take something home, don't you?
Yeah, shoot, I don't have to.
We're going to show that.
I usually wear that. I wear that medal to bed at night. So.
So you do actually get a medal then?
Yeah, you get a medal. Yeah.
Okay.
You bet. It's very nice. Yeah.
Do you have as a goal to be back there again someday?
I didn't ever have as a goal to get there, so I don't know that you can plan those things. I guess maybe to a certain degree you can. I mean, I at this point, I have a whole list of CDs that I want to record. I mean, it's 10. I mean, I'd have to, in fact, I should go work right now.
You shouldn't be doing that. The area that we're in, Chester, Montana, how does that influence and inspire you as far as your compositions?
It's a big influence. That's one of the main reasons that we came back here, is that I really love this land. There's something about this country that really opens me up, and you know, it's probably because I spent so much time here, and when I was here, I was really here. You know, I mean, I really did look around, and it's not the kind of country that most people drive through and say, "Wow, that's a beautiful place." You know, they'll drive through it and they'll kind of look and say, "Yeah, okay, well, there's that." But I think that in some ways my music is like that. You know, there's this kind of an immediate sound that you say, "Well, okay, there's that," and then if you really start listening, and if you get into it, it's the same as the landscape. If you start actually being here, if you start looking around, and if you start taking your time and watching the sky change, because the one great thing about this country is the sky. There's not many trees to really, you know, get in your way. So the sky, the hills, Sweetgrass Hills, the Marias River, these are all incredibly important to me, and I draw a really direct inspiration from them for the music.
We saw you before we started with this program sitting with some young people, and you do this a lot. But tell us how important it is for you to work with young people. It seems like that's important.
Oh, it's a big deal. You know, and I actually think that's one of the things that the Governor's Award did for me, was to realize that if you have a gift, you have to keep giving it in order to get back. And you have to make sure that it goes on. So really the only way that you can do that is to teach in whatever way that you can. Since I'm on the road so often, I can't really be a regular teacher of piano students because I'm just gone too much and it's not fair to them. So my wife and I have set up a foundation called Arts Without Boundaries, a nonprofit organization, and what we do is we go into the schools, and when I say we, I mean me and other artists that are part of this group, who are national performing artists who tour and will be in a place and say, as part of a concert, they'll have an outreach, community outreach. So we've set up this foundation to help support that, because schools are having a very tough time right now. You know, we've got plenty of money for other things. We've got plenty of money for bombs. We don't have money for schools. We don't have money for the arts. It's a shame. So we hope to make up a little bit of the difference in that. So when I go out and I do concerts, a lot of times I'll spend a day ahead of time in the community, working in the schools, working with kids. I've spent week-long periods of time. I did that in Fort Benton for a week. I've done it in high schools all over, and grade schools all over the state and all over the country.
I know you're busy playing while the children are listening, but do you get a sense as you look around or glance at them that some lights are going off in some of these kids, like it did for you in church?
Oh, sure. And you never really know which kids are going to respond to you. And I mean, I don't have to actually look at them to know that something's going on. I can feel them listening. That's part of the concert experience, is the communication between you and your audience. You know, you can feel if people are there, you can feel something going on. And a lot of times I'll be playing, I'll look up and I'll see somebody very intent, you know, and I've just felt them do that. Yeah. So playing for kids, you don't just play for the ones that are designated as the smart ones or the best ones. You play for everybody, because you don't know who it is that's going to take something from what you're doing.
Talking about feelings, what is it like sitting here playing in the same building where you first were exposed to music at the age of 4, and your mother and so forth was around, and your other relatives? Does that help inspire you?
Oh, yeah. It's inspiring, it's comfortable, and I like being part of a community. I like being part of a place where there are still people here who knew my grandparents. That's a really important thing for me. That continuity of a community, because you realize that people are not independent, that we are very dependent upon each other. And to me, that extends to the whole world, the whole world is a concert, really. And what I was talking to the kids, I was saying that listening is the most important thing that you can do. I absolutely believe that, and that's one of the things that we do when we go out, is we tell people, tell kids especially, that we're going to do some listening exercises. And I have them, I say, I bet you can't listen for a whole minute. And most of them can, but it's really tough. And then I'll say, if people in the world would listen to each other, this world would be a lot safer place. So you cannot underestimate the importance of music and sound.
We should talk about the changes you've seen in music, that today you actually work with computers and composing on a computer. That part of the business has changed a lot, hasn't it? It's
changed a tremendous amount, and it's one of the reasons that we have our own record company too, is that, at some point, I think it's something that's happened all over the world, is that large industries have taken over everything, and there's become a bottom line for everything. So that marginal musicians, and by that I mean musicians who aren't top 40 musicians, there's even a classical top 40. I mean, there's music that gets played with classical orchestras. If you're a marginal musician in any sense, if you're making new music, if you're making music that's a little bit outside of the ordinary, it's pretty tough these days. So a lot of us who really didn't want to become musical engineers, know how to do all this equipment and stuff, have really been, in a sense, forced to do that, because the budgets have come way down. And in order to make the kind of records that we want to make, we've bought our own equipment and we've learned how to operate it. So pretty much all the musicians that I work with at this point have computers, and they have digital recording equipment. They know different microphones. They know how to record things. It's just something that we've had to learn as part of the history of this particular time in music.
When you made the Grammy nominee recording in the auditorium, did you have a professional crew come in to mic that and so forth, or was that done by yourself and your wife, or what?
I had a professional crew, and that professional crew's name was Tim Carter. He's from Nashville, Tennessee, and he was our sound man in the band I have called Newgrange. And Tim's a great banjo player, but he's also a great engineer. So I had all the equipment. We brought all my equipment, microphones and preamp and digital recorder and speakers and all that stuff. We set them up in the music teacher's office in the back, and Tim did a sound check and set up the microphones and just recorded the whole thing right there.
It's pretty amazing that you can start at that level and end up at the Grammys.
It really is. It really is an incredible thing.
Are you finding that young people, since they like computers, that are getting more into composition?
Yeah, I think so, and it's composition not in the way that most people think of, where there's the serious long-haired composer and sitting there with the candle right there in the long hours of the night writing down the music, and he'll play. No, it's that one, and they write down. It's kids are using sounds from all over. It used to be called musique concrète. It was chunks of this and chunks of that you put together with tape. Well, it's the same thing. I have a son, Michael, who's 23 years old and is composing. He's doing what's called loops. He's a composer, and he's doing another thing. It's called beats and loops. And that's what a lot of hip-hop and rap music is, just basically all these sounds that are strung together and put together on computers. And kids seem to know how to do this naturally. I mean, because music, to me, is nothing more than organized sound. So there's a lot of composing going on. It's just we don't really know exactly where it's going to go. We don't know what we're going to hear. But there are kids who are taking this just as another instrument rather than as some difficult machine to learn and then use. I mean, they just do it naturally. They put these sounds together. This 5th grade class, I've been working with them a little bit too here, and it'll be interesting to see what they come up with.
So the children that you have, how were they inspired by music? Was it from you, or do you know?
I think what I gave to my kids was a machete. I mean, I had the machete, and I think I cleared the undergrowth a little bit for them, so that they see it as a natural thing. They see music making as a natural thing. 2 of my 3 older sons are professional musicians, and the 3rd one is a really great amateur musician. He's a visual artist, but 2 of them are already in bands and are recording and touring and doing the whole thing. But I think, I think they learned from me. I didn't sit down and try to teach them how to play the piano, but they had access to what I was doing. They were always in my room looking over my shoulder, and access to the equipment and doing all that sort of thing. So I think that maybe my gift to them was to let them know that this is something that you can do if you want to do it, and it can be fun, and it can be, and they know how to work. They know that it's hard work, and they know how to do that.
The little time we have left, what do you think your future is? Where do you want to go? You mentioned 10 CDs. Is that your goal, is to keep making CDs?
Oh yeah, I mean, your goal as a musician is to play until you drop, basically. And because I think I have the best job in the world.
Okay. We're going to ask you to play for a couple of minutes to kind of close the show out. But before we do that, we want to thank you for allowing us to spend a half hour of your time. It's quite an honor to have you as a resident of Montana. I know that you have done a lot of good things in attracting attention to the state. At least I would think you would feel that way.
Well, I don't know. But thanks for coming to Chester. I think that it's important that these small towns get some attention, because things are not that easy out on the plains these days. There's a lot of budget cuts. There's a lot of things going down in schools and in arts. And I think the more that attention that people pay to something that is vitally important to their lives, like music and education, the more you'll realize that the money needs to go into that.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks.
Philip Aaberg in Chester, Montana, and we're going to close the show out while we've given him the freedom to pick whatever he wants to play to close out the show. But thank you for joining us on the Montana Television Network Face the State program today. Have a great day and enjoy the music.